Good afternoon, everybody. We are glad to be a part of this year's Around the World conference. 3 of us from Nigeria will be participating in this 2015 edition. Sunday Dada is from the Department of Philosophy here in Ekiti State University, while Tunde Muluwamo is from the Department of French. I am Omolaro Uweye. I'm from the English and Literary Studies Department. Titilola Babalola in Canada will present immediately after us. That makes the 4 of us on the group. And we'll be speaking on digital research and humanistic studies in Nigeria. The attempt being made here is to describe what happens with our research here in this age of digitization. We are aware that the theme of the conference, the larger theme of the conference this year, is big data. And we know that there's no doubt we're in the age of big data. Dr. Dada, I'm sure you would like to tell us and confirm that this is actually the period where we can say we're in the age of big data.
Well, thank you very much, Mrs. Uweye. I'm glad to be part of this year's Around the World conference. And as you all know, we are talking about big data. But in our presentation, as Dr. Uweye has rightly said, we are looking at digital research and humanistic studies in Nigeria. But I'll be talking about big data now. We are all aware that data is being produced in an ever-increasing rate today all around the world. And the volume of data being produced in the world today is so great that sometimes we even find it difficult to manage. Both structured and unstructured data are produced everywhere, and we know it's no news that more of unstructured data are produced. In fact, it is said that the structured data that we have constitutes only 20% of the data we have out there. And the growth of data is driven by the fact that individuals are more into the use of media today. Organizations are also more into, in fact, some organizations have to glean information from the internet, from the data available to make certain organizational decisions. Also, it's being driven by the fact that people have switched from analog to digital technologies. And we're also aware that there is increase in storage capacities, and also the fact that what we use in generating data is available. Phones, we note that we have as much phones in the world today as there are people in the world. And when we are talking about big data, we are talking about the volume, the velocity, and the variety of structured and unstructured data that are being generated on a daily basis. And we have to note that human beings have become, all of us have become data generators, whether we know it or not. Also included in the definition of big data is the veracity.
But Sunday, what do you mean by veracity? The data is what is available before us. Then the question of veracity, I think, can you please explain?
Well, you see, the question of veracity has to do with the truth of data. We are all aware that data is manipulated.
Okay.
And if somebody is posting something maybe on the internet or has something on his database, we have to be sure that there is no error in it.
How do you make sure?
Well, one of the ways by which one can be sure that there's no error is to look at what one wants to store properly, or what one is gleaning, for instance, from the internet. Because you see, if there is error within a system, error perpetuates error. So that's very, very, very important.
Okay, thank you, Sunday. You see, when we talk of data and digitization, you said in this age of big data, almost everything is in data form, things are digitized. But bringing it to our topic, which is digital research and humanistic studies, especially in Nigeria, we discovered that even though so many of the materials we need, so many of the things we use are digitized, they are on the internet, we still discovered that so many are yet to be on the internet. So many are yet to be on the internet, especially when we look from the angle of oral literature. In Africa, in Nigeria in particular also, there is an angle to literary studies that is spoken, oral. There is a volume of festivals, dance, rituals, songs, displays that are annual performances of the same thing that are yet to be in data form. And so, if anybody is researching to that aspect of literary studies, the person will still have to go out there and glean his own materials directly from source, so to say. But the question this now raises is, does digital research remove field work? That is, for instance, if you are studying a particular festival, some of the festivals, many of the festivals are available in digital form. But because each society in Africa has its own peculiar festival, each society has its own form of rituals, has its own form of oral performances that characterize its culture, that characterize its custom, its way of life. And so some of these festivals are ready to decide, but some are not. Postgraduate students, undergraduate students who are now conducting research in these fields, almost always they have to go out there to conduct research. They can't easily make use of what is available in digital form or what is available on the internet. Now, the question this poses very seriously is that, does digital research remove fieldwork? If at the end of the day we are there digitally and all our materials are already in data form, will that mean that digital research will now remove fieldwork? Of course not. So it means that as often as possible, data will keep on coming in, especially from this angle. And one thing too about the unavailability of these oral materials on the internet is the issue of language. Each society has its own oral materials, oral performances, and they are expressed in their peculiar languages. So how do we digitize them? Researchers have to do translation along with research before they can make something out of it. And then to digitize, it means double job also, translation before digitization. That's why I'll now hand over to Tunde Moriwamo, who wants to talk to us about translation in the data age.
Yeah, thank you. I want to contribute to this conference by talking on big data and the challenge for machine translation and translation industry. We all know that across the globe, there exists a small number of skilled translators, who are faced with large volumes of data to be translated, rendered from one language into another. And due to the scale and volumes of this data requiring translation, most recent technological developments have evolved to produce or to take translation to a world hungry for huge volumes of translated multilingual content. And we know when we talk of digitized data, this will take us to the realm of machine translation or digital computers that are used to translate data. And the idea of digital computers for translation came up in 1629 when René Descartes proposed a universal language. And ever since, the field of machine or digital computers for translation has expanded with a huge variety of machine translators such as Ciceron, Reverso, Trados, Alta Vista, Babelfish, and even Google Machine. And let me say that today, Google Machine can translate 1 million books in a day, within 24 hours. And when we talk of machine translation, this is not a straightforward, when we talk of translation poses its own challenge. And the question is this: in view of the volumes and scale of data to be translated from one language into another, can human or machine translation readily replace machine translation or machine translators? This is a big question for us. We know that while machine translation helps to accomplish more in less time, most of today's best machine translation can only accommodate 150 languages at a go at a time. And this is a challenge to the digital world. We also note that there's a problem of disambiguating, the untranslatables when it comes to translating words that are not translatable. That is, we mean, how do we find equivalence for a word that has more than one meaning? This is a problem to translation and even to translators, because without a universal encyclopedia, digital computers will not be able to distinguish between two meanings of a particular word. I will also say that the translation of non-standard language into standard language is also a problem to the digital computers, because computer or digital machines will readily have problems expressing or translating regional expressions or languages like the Pidgin language, languages that are not codified from one language into another. This gives these problems give machine translation a difficult task to accomplish. And in view of these problems, two approaches stand out clearly to resolve this crisis. Number one is the shallow approach. This one assumes no knowledge, that the translator assumes no knowledge of the data to be rendered from one language into another. The second one is this. We talk of the deep approach. This deep approach, assumes a comprehensive knowledge of the data to be translated from one language into another. And in spite of this, we know that digital tools, in spite of these problems, we can readily say that digital tools help humanists to network and partner with professionals in a digital world.
Okay, now, sorry, Tunde, let me ask you, as a translator, let me say as a consultant translator, would you say that Nigerian languages have been affected? For instance, now, in machine translation, how many languages from Nigeria can I find on the net? If I want to read in my language, how many of those languages exist digitally?
Thank you. While we acknowledge the contribution of René Descartes to the digital world, we also spotlight my contribution to the limitation of these digital computers. As we can see readily on the net, using Google Machine, we recognize the fact that among the languages we have in Nigeria, only three Nigerian languages are digitized on the net. And these are Hausa, Yoruba, and the Igbo language. These languages are available on the net.
And we have up to about 300 languages?
We have about 250 languages in Nigeria.
Okay.
And this is one of the limitations, the challenge that digital, the digital humanities, digital humanities is facing, even in Africa and particularly in Nigeria. Thank you.
Thank you. Before you hang on that, Tunde, I would still like to ask that if digital translation thrives the way you hope or the way you foresee, do you think it might be a problem for human translators, especially professional translators, who make a living by translation? Do you foresee a period when translation will be taken over by the computer and human translators
I don't see thank you for that question. I don't see digital computers coming to be a threat to human translators. Rather, it will only improve and resolve some of the crises translators face by making constant recourse to data bank to extract meaning of a word, maybe using all this manual checking, thesaurus, and whatever to bring out meaning or equivalence during translation. Digital computers will help to alleviate some of the challenges of human translators. So I don't see it as a threat to professional translators. Thank you.
Tunde does not see computer translation as a threat to human translators, not even in the nearest future. So someday, you were talking on the internet, the availability of data and research, and as a thinker, I heard you saying that there's something the internet does to thinking and all that stuff. Would you like to?
Well, I think before I go to that, I first of all would like to talk about the precarious situation the humanities is in Nigeria.
Okay.
And you will understand that the humanities is being marginalized today. And the truth of that is that the government, the private organizations are only looking at the value of things only in material terms. More money is being given to science, to funding science, while humanities is not funded because they think, well, science can give more money. What does philosophy do? Yeah. What does studying language? What does it do? What does it do to the people?
Somebody said we all speak language anyway.
Yeah, we all speak language, but some people study it. But because it does not give, it doesn't have a direct maybe influence on the economy of the country. It is being marginalized and treated as something that is that actually should be done the way we even within the academics, and that's a very, very big problem. But I see that as part of an intellectualist program on the part of the government and the people, because you know that when you study humanities, you are made aware of the thought of your people, the thought of your ancestors, and humanities is liberating. Are you getting my point?
Yes.
And the people that are leading does not want the mind of people to be liberated, and I see that as a deliberate attempt on the part of the government not to fund humanity, and that's a part of the problem we're having. You will notice that the digitization of material that you are talking about, if the government of the country is so interested in the humanities, we will have more of the material. You noted the other time that more of the humanistic materials are not digitized. And it is because the government is not ready to fund this aspect, of the economy. And like I said, I see it as part of an anti-intellectualist program on the part of the ruling class. But when it comes to what we have on the internet, or what we have in many databases. We have a lot of data, a lot. The humanists today have a lot to deal with, even though we have to agree that, especially when it comes to the works of African scholars, that more of it are not on the internet, especially when it comes to where it is publicly accessible without payment. We don't have much of that. But be that as it may, I would like to say that we have a lot of material that the humanists, in pictures, in films, in newspapers, and that is where we glean the thought of the people. That is what humanists, count as data that they work with. But the availability sometimes can be very, very inundating. It can flood the mind. You can get whatever you like at the snap of your fingers. You can put anything on Google, and Google will give you a lot of things to work with.
Now,
but we have to be very, very careful.
Okay.
Are you getting my point? And that is the fact that sometimes when you have a lot of things to work with, you may not use your brain. If I read a book by Nicholas Carr talking about what the internet does to the brain, that sometimes the availability of material can stifle human thinking. So we can have materials, philosophical materials. We can have literary materials, but it is not the literary materials that matter. You can have literary materials without having literary minds, because people who are working with the data that is available are not ready to think. They are not ready to think. So we must be able to strike a balance between big data. Are you getting it? In humanity, because as humanists, we are not working with minerals. We are not working with elements. We work with people. We work with the thought, and we have to think along and be able to subject whatever we see to critical analysis. But when we have so much that we cannot, create space and distance ourselves from what we have for creative thinking, you will agree with me that creativity is going to be stifled in humanistic studies.
I agree with you that creativity will be stifled because of availability of so much data. When you have a thought on your head, when you have a need for any material, when you think of something, the next thing to do is to press, and you're looking for the material on the internet, and you are bombarded with a list of materials, with a list of ideas that may hinder you from doing your own thinking. Yes, I agree totally with that. But I still want to stress the point about the availability of African materials even in data form. For instance, now as a philosopher, if you have an idea and you need materials, you press your computer, you press your phone, you have your materials, you have everything you need. But there are still times where I'm sure that you get to the internet, in spite of the volume of data available, that you are dismayed. You can't find what you want. For instance, in philosophy, you do things about the Ifa oracle, you study the Ifa oracle, you talk about the African culture, Ori and all those. Will you say that all those Ifa, as they are regarded to in Yoruba land, are they on the internet? Are they available in digital form? If I need a particular verse of the Ifa oracle, if I press the internet, will they be available on me?
Well, we have to agree that is why we are focusing on humanistic studies in Nigeria. There is a limitation in that area.
There is a limitation
in that area.
When it comes to availability of our materials in digital form.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Now, bringing that back to literary studies, there is a serious limitation to our research, digital research. For instance, if you want to study maybe even the Nobel laureates, Wole Soyinka, for instance, the best you can get is that gleaning from site to site, you can have some of his materials, gleaning from web to web, you can have some of his materials, and what you will have even depends. You have some essays in certain sites, you can get some articles there, you can see the books on display in Google Books. But would you know that there is yet to be a database, for instance, to contain all the works of, say, Wole Soyinka, the works of Chinua Achebe, essays, articles, books, manuscripts, things that are written by the playwright, by the Nobel laureate himself. So in our research in this part of the world, there is still a strong limitation when it comes to digital research. The only thing we do is we glean from site to site. We get some, we don't get some of those you get are not available, you have to buy. Through means that you may not even be able to see through because of certain limitations to us here. And so the humanistic research here, we can say, is not yet fully digitized. It's still manually conducted. In most cases, we still look for materials in other forms apart from in data forms. And it's the same problem that in James Yeku, it's the same problem he identified in his paper. It's the same situation that Titilola Babalola also identified in her paper on digital research in Nigeria. And that is why on this same matter, Titilola Babalola will be coming on to shed more light on the issue of digital research and humanistic studies in Nigeria.
On the fact that there is the need to be careful when we are dealing with data. And that is the fact that for humanists, data has what I can call evidentiary value. Because in humanistic studies, we tend to want to glean materials either to make use of them in arguing for a position or as a way of drawing inference from them. But if we are not careful, we may be guilty of what is called data fundamentalism. And that is a situation whereby you believe that every data you find on the internet is true. But I don't think that should be the case. Most of the time, some people post internet sites where materials that are published or materials that are posted are not that materials that are reviewed, or we have some journals that may even publish on the internet that are papers that are not peer reviewed. And in such a situation, data that are not qualitative, data whose veracity has not been ascertained, can be posted on the internet.
That's why I was talking about particular sites. In fact, that's why we talk the issue of data curation coming. That's one serious missing part of digital research in Nigeria. It's seriously missing. For now, there's no data curation. I said most of the data we use are just available at different parts of the internet. And the internet is as wide as the world. Anybody posts anything in one corner of the internet, another person can go in there and pick it up and use without you're speaking of veracity, making sure of the certainty, the safety, the quality of such materials. And that is why we have databases for different materials from different topics, from different authors. If there is a deliberate attempt at archiving digitally certain materials, of course such sites will be 100% dependable. But when you talk of materials, as we are speaking now, when we finish, when we leave this place now, 3 of us at different times can decide to post anything, and that will be available for anybody, and that will increase the amount of data. But it means that we don't have to just go to any part of the internet and look for something. Some of the things that we read on the internet are not correct. But if we have our own database and we load in there what we need, then it will be a lot. The issue of veracity would almost totally have been dealt with. Okay.
Well, if I have to just say a little about translation, I would like to say that within the context of Nigeria, that something needs to be done about trying to digitize Nigerian languages. And if we have machine translators, that will help. Because studying the culture of people involves also studying their language. And we know that we can enrich our culture by understanding the culture of other people, other people in the world, other cultures, even within the Nigerian context. Yoruba people can benefit from Hausa culture if we understand their language, or we are able to interpret or translate what has been written in Hausa language into our own language, and we're able to understand what is happening there. So I do believe that the humanist study in Nigeria can benefit much from this big data thing.
Thank you. Before you respond, let me say something so you can marry the two together. He says he believes that digital translation can help some of those languages that are not yet translated digitally in Nigeria. But there is this problem that translation naturally has, even human translation, and that is the problem of translation across cultures. For instance, there are certain words, even in the Yoruba language, that for which you cannot find an equivalent in the English language. That's talking of the major language. Now, when we now talk of the minor languages, and we are not talking of the machine, okay? If, for instance, now, as a human translator, I'm yet to find an exact word, a perfect word in the English language to fit akara, okay? Some people say bean cake. The idea of akara is not the idea of cake. It's not baked, it's fried. So now, in human translation, when you use your brain and try your best to translate certain words, we encounter hardships. Will a machine will not be much more confused? What do you do to untranslatable words? What is the situation of what do you say about the untranslatable and machine translation?
Yeah, thank you. When we talk of translation, or specifically literary translation, we know that machine translation can readily do some jobs, but not to a point of perfectly delivering that translation to the comprehension of people, or to the target reader. What do I mean? In translation, we know that the central problem of translation, or the central notion of translation, is the notion of equivalence. And this equivalence is the central problem of translation. And in translation studies, there's this approach proposed by this problem, suggested by Gensler, when he talks about the notion of translatability and untranslatability of text. What I mean by text, cultural text, codified text, or texts that are written maybe in non-standard languages. You see, we have problems in rendering certain elements, cultural elements, even when human translations are involved, when human translators are involved. There is this problem of rendering a particular word, cultural word, from one language into another. Much more, this problem becomes complex when you want to use machine or computer to translate these cultural features from one language into another. There will definitely be a problem of delivery. In terms of sense, there will be a problem of equivalence in terms of sense, in terms of style, in terms of faithfulness. In fact, when we talk of faithfulness, a translated text should read, should flow like the original text. But the problem lies in, the big question lies in how machine translation will now replace human translation or human translators. And this is a big challenge to the digital world. And I want to submit here that machine translation can never replace human translators. Okay. It is not possible. Machine translators or machine translation or digital translation can never replace human translators, because there is no how a computer will readily translate idioms, cultural expressions, expressions that are aphorisms, proverbs that are really coded in one culture. For instance, Yoruba culture maybe into French. This cultural movement is not easy for machine to to transpose or to move. Even within languages, it's not easy for you to naturally translate, a cultural element from one language into another naturally like that. No talk of coming to the level of using machine or computer to really transfer the sense.
I'm trying to say then that machine translation naturally uses word for word translation.
Machine translation,
Can a machine use sense for sense translation?
It is possible. It depends on what the software.
Yes,
what is imputed.
Sunday is talking about when you put in error, you get that is what you put in.
What machine? What machine translation? What machine translation can do is to just translate word for word. What he sees, maybe the literal meaning. It is now at this point that machine translation has completed its job, that human translators will now come in to marry the meanings of these words according to sense.
So
style
human
of the original.
translators have to complement
machine translate. Yes, that is exactly the point.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We will now hand over to Titilola Babalola, who will continue on the state of digital research, humanistic studies in Nigeria. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
My name is Titilola Babalola Ayegusi, and I'm joining the Nigerian panel from Lethbridge, Canada, to talk on the topic Digital Research and Humanistic Studies in Nigeria. The main thrust of this panel, as introduced by Lara, is to consider how big data affects humanistic research in Nigeria. We also consider factors impeding big data in Nigeria and ways to bridge the gap between digital research in the country and the developed world. So typically in Nigeria, humanistic data exists in different forms. Prior to the advent of digital technology, humanistic research existed mainly in oral forms, and it still exists in oral forms today. We have them in oral narratives, oral performances, and various forms of oral cultural heritage still preserved in the word of mouth. We also have digital humanistic data preserved in hard copies, such as textbooks, such as paintings, maps, different forms of artifacts and sculptures. But with the development of digital technology, humanistic data in Nigeria has changed forms and has moved across platforms. So we have textbooks now downloaded on screens, available online, and can be accessed through many other platforms, such as screens and mobile phones. It's important to understand the relevance of big data in humanistic research in Nigeria, because it helps us not just to identify the challenges humanities researchers face in the age of digitization, but also helps us to examine ways to patch the increasing divide between the way digital research is done in Nigeria and other parts of the world, especially the developed world. The relevance of big data to research in Nigeria cannot be overemphasized. The major benefit to studies in humanities is that big data helps us to access information about our oral and cultural heritage. It also provides African representation in digitally collected data. The analysis of big data also enables us to access information that will give us a richer and deeper understanding of Nigerian literatures, both oral and written. What exists as big data in Nigeria humanistic research, as explained by Sunday in the talk before mine, is an unstructured and relatively large volume of information. The question then is, how is the information acquired through big data true to the subject of inquiry? And how does this information help to support the arguments and claims of the researcher? The truth is, aside from the information procured from reputable sources such as online books, online journals, institutional sites, and digital projects managed by institutions and scholars, most of the big data available on Nigerian humanities studies pose the question of authenticity. Recently, a colleague asked me why I always recommended that articles about Nigeria be reviewed only by Nigerians. My answer was simply that there are lots of information on the internet about virtually every subject of inquiry. But when the subject is about Nigeria or some other developing country, what you see isn't necessarily what you get. And what do I mean by this? In a situation where you make an inquiry about a certain subject in Nigeria, and you get a lot of information that promise to give information about that will support your claim. Digging deep into the material or even opening these files, you might discover that what is promised isn't necessarily what you get. Such documents can bear lots of biases and misrepresentation of the subject of inquiry. Since most of these sources form part of big data on Nigerian humanistic research, the problem is often that they are unreliable and cannot be verified because they bear such biases and misconceptions. It will be difficult then for a person who has not been immersed in the culture of Nigeria to see through such misconceptions and biases. The Nigerian culture is so nuanced that understanding it requires more than the information that can be acquired online or on the internet. The importance of having reliable big data that can be used for scholastic research in humanities cannot be overemphasized. Unfortunately, as with other aspects of development, there is a wide gap between developed and developing worlds in the way digital research is done. In a developing world like Nigeria, big data faces several challenges when it comes to humanistic inquiry. The major challenge is the mere fact that a large part of African literature still exists in its oral form. And with the advent of westernization, a significant portion of these narratives have gone extinct. As Lara mentioned in the talk before this recording, data curation is a challenge to big data in Nigerian humanistic research. In the process of gathering data, other associated issues such as complexity of data may arise. For instance, how do we identify the standards in oral narratives? African oral narratives typically have a formulaic structure, but the content can be varied and can be retold to fit different audiences and occasions. In a situation where this version of an oral tale that is procured, how do we identify the original version? And in such a case, current technological softwares can be used to analyze various versions of this tale, classifying them into narratologic categories and identifying the earliest versions by examining aspects of linguistic corpora and reference to specific events or names. However, such projects would require funding, and as Sunday already mentioned, funding is also a major problem associated with humanistic research in Nigeria. Working hand in hand with this problem is the lack of trained personnel. People who can procure and deal competently with big data sets. For example, many of the digital humanities projects about Nigeria and Africa as a whole are handled mainly by institutions and groups located outside the country, especially universities or institutions in the United States of America and in Europe. This isn't because there aren't people who can't handle these projects in Africa, but unfortunately, people who might be able to handle these projects are not trained to handle such data and give the perfect result that would give a true representation of the subject of inquiry. With proper funding and good infrastructure, such as access to high cable connectivity and other technological devices, Nigerian humanities researchers will be able to take on digital humanities projects like curating, transcribing, and archiving oral narratives. They might be able to even take on more challenging projects like transforming literary texts into scholastic digital editions using guidelines of text encoding initiative. TEI can be very useful in Nigerian humanistic research because it can make a lot of information explicit. Such files would not only contain the actual transcribed or transformed text, but also metadata associated with the text, such as links that give further information about the meaning associated with such narratives. It might also provide background information to sociological milieux that produced such texts. Through such digital projects, the further extinction of oral literature and Nigerian languages can be stopped. Materials gathered through the curation process can be properly analyzed, structured, and archived. Most importantly, such initiatives will help us create an awareness for digital research in humanities in Nigeria. It will also provide a good representation of Nigerian digital research in the collection of big data and hopefully begin the process of closing the digital research divide between Nigeria and developed countries. Thank you.